They've stood there for what, 4,500 years? It's mind-boggling.
Oh, like Great Pyramids here.
The Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Just massive. And you just can't help but wonder, how did they pull it off? We're talking people from so long ago, you picture them with primitive tools,
Right.
but they built these things so huge and yet so precise.
It is a puzzle, for sure.
It really is. That combination of the massive scale and the intricate details. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
That's right. And we're not just going over the same old stuff you've probably heard a million times. Today, we're really going deep into the engineering of these pyramids.
Okay.
You know, you've probably come across bits and pieces of information about them over the years, but we're going to try and put those pieces together.
Yeah.
To help you really grasp how they were built, what their purpose was,
Right.
and why they still capture our imagination after all this time. Think of it like we're going on a guided tour to really understand this wonder of the ancient world.
Exactly. We've been digging into historical accounts and the work of experts to bring you the most interesting perspectives on this.
It's fascinating.
We won't be going off on crazy theories or anything.
Yeah.
We're going to stick to what we have evidence for,
Uh-huh.
what the main theories are, and why these pyramids are so fascinating thousands of years later.
Absolutely.
So let's get right to it. You see these huge blocks perfectly fit together, towering hundreds of feet high.
Oh, yeah.
The question just jumps out at you, doesn't it? How did they do it?
It's the million-dollar question, really, or maybe the multi-ton question.
Right.
Archaeologists and engineers are still trying to figure it out. The image that probably comes to mind is a bunch of people, maybe slaves, hauling these giant stone blocks up these massive ramps.
Yeah, that's what you always see in the picture.
That's the classic idea. And while ramps were definitely involved somehow, the precision of it all, especially the higher up you go,
Oh, yeah.
it kind of suggests that they had to have some smarter solutions than just brute force.
Okay, so the ramp theory is kind of the first thing you think of.
Right.
If you had to lift something that heavy, a ramp makes sense.
Yeah.
But what are some of the newer ideas that either add to or challenge that theory? What were they doing that was so clever?
Well, what's really interesting is the research that's being done on counterweights and even using water as a lubricant. Imagine they might have used a system of levers and weights that were carefully balanced
Oh, wow.
to help lift and position those giant blocks. And think about this. If they wet the surfaces they were moving the blocks on, even a little bit of water can make a huge difference in friction.
That's true.
And these ideas aren't mutually exclusive. They
Right.
could have used them together. You know, these theories try to explain how they got the pyramid aligned so perfectly
Right.
and how they moved and placed such huge stones with the technology we think they had back then. It's important to remember that the exact methods they used are still up for debate among experts.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Millions of limestone blocks, some weighing as much as an SUV today,
It's crazy.
quarried miles away and then moved and placed just right. The logistics alone are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
How did they even begin to organize something that massive?
Well, when you look at the bigger picture, it shows you how incredibly organized ancient Egyptian society was.
Right.
Think about all the infrastructure they needed. The quarries themselves, the roads to transport the stone, which probably involved both land and water.
Yeah.
The sheer number of people involved, not just the laborers,
Right.
but also the surveyors, the engineers, the people feeding everyone, housing them, managing it all.
It's almost a city in itself.
Yeah, exactly. It shows you how powerful the pharaohs were. They could command huge resources and a big part of the population.
And speaking of the workforce, finding that workers' village near Giza in the 1990s really changed things, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It gave us a look into the lives of the people who actually built these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It moved us away from this idea of just forced labor.
Right.
What they found in that village paints a picture of a really organized, skilled workforce.
Really?
We're talking bakeries making tons of food, breweries for making beer, which was a big part of their diet,
Wow.
signs of medical care, and even a hierarchy within the workforce.
Interesting.
This suggests that building the pyramids was a huge project supported by the state, involving a large and important part of Egyptian society. It took lots of planning, expertise, and it even seems like there was a sense of community.
So it wasn't just a bunch of slaves being forced to work?
No, not at all.
No, moving on from the actual construction, one of the most amazing things about the pyramids is how perfectly they're aligned with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west.
That's incredible.
It's not just close, it's incredibly precise. What does that tell us about the ancient Egyptians?
Well, it raises some fascinating questions about their understanding of the cosmos
Okay.
and their ability to make really accurate measurements. The Great Pyramid is almost perfectly aligned with true north, which is the actual axis the Earth rotates around, not magnetic north.
Right.
That's not an easy thing to do. It really suggests that they had a sophisticated understanding of how the stars move
Mm-hmm.
and the math skills to translate those observations into precise alignments on the ground.
That's incredible.
Whether this was for religious reasons, like to align with certain constellations,
Okay.
or if this astronomical knowledge played a practical role in the construction itself,
Right.
like in orienting the whole complex, that's still being researched. But there's no doubt they had a strong grasp of astronomy and math.
So it wasn't just about building impressive tombs.
Mm,
It seems like these pyramids were deeply connected to their understanding of the universe.
definitely. While their main purpose was to be tombs for the pharaohs in the afterlife,
Yeah.
the design, the orientation, even the layout inside and any inscriptions,
Yeah.
it all probably had deep religious and cosmological meaning.
So it wasn't just practical, it was symbolic too.
Exactly. The pyramids might have been seen as a kind of cosmic machine
That's interesting.
to help the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife and connect him with the celestial realm. Understanding this symbolism gives us a window into the ancient Egyptian religion and worldview.
And it's interesting that the unfinished pyramids give us clues too.
Oh, for sure.
It's like seeing them in the middle of construction
Yeah.
and getting a glimpse of their techniques and the challenges they faced.
Exactly. Unfinished pyramids let us examine the different stages of construction
Mm.
and see the problems they might have run into. We can see how they prepared the blocks, how they might have set up ramps at different points,
Okay.
and sometimes even why they abandoned a project.
Yeah. Like if something went wrong.
Maybe, could be because a pharaoh died, or they had engineering difficulties, or ran out of resources.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like a snapshot, even though it's incomplete,
Right.
of how huge and complex this undertaking was.
Now, going back in time a bit, we have to talk about some of the earliest accounts of the pyramids. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote about them. How accurate are his writings based on what we know today?
Herodotus wrote about them almost 2,000 years after they were built.
Wow.
His accounts are really valuable because there's some of the first written records we have from an outsider's perspective.
Right.
They give us a glimpse into how these monuments were seen in the ancient world, but we have to remember that he got his information secondhand
Okay.
from local guides and interpretations that had been passed down for centuries.
So it's like a game of telephone. Things might have changed.
Yeah, some of it was probably exaggerated or just plain wrong or influenced by the beliefs of his time. So while his writings are interesting, modern archaeology gives us a much more accurate and evidence-based understanding of the pyramids
Right, because they can actually study the pyramids themselves.
and use scientific dating methods.
So we have to take those early accounts with a grain of salt. But then fast forward a couple thousand years, and Jean-Francois Champollion deciphers the Rosetta Stone. That was huge for Egyptology, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was revolutionary.
How did that change our understanding of the pyramids, even though the Rosetta Stone itself isn't about them?
Well, think of it this way. Champollion figuring out hieroglyphics was like unlocking a giant library of ancient Egyptian knowledge.
Wow.
Religious texts, records, inscriptions, all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
And while the Rosetta Stone itself doesn't talk about building pyramids,
Right.
it gave us the key to understanding the writing found in and around other Egyptian monuments, including later pyramids and temples.
So it opened up a whole new world of understanding.
It did. It allowed scholars to really understand the religious beliefs, the ideologies of the rulers, and the whole cultural context of the pyramids, why they were so important. It was like giving the ancient Egyptians their voices back.
Let's switch gears a bit and talk about some of the more fun facts. I was amazed to learn how long the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure on Earth.
It's incredible. It held that title for over 3,800 years.
You're kidding.
Think about that for a second. Almost 4,000 years. It shows you how massive and ambitious this project was.
Right.
It wasn't until the 14th century AD, when the Lincoln Cathedral in England was built, that something taller came along.
Wow. And another thing people might not realize is that they weren't always the rough, sandy-colored things we see today.
Right.
They used to sparkle in the sun. What's the story with those casing stones?
Yeah, so the pyramids were originally covered in these smooth, polished casing stones made of beautiful white Tura limestone.
Oh, wow.
They were cut and fit together so precisely
Uh-huh.
that you could barely fit a knife blade between them.
Wow.
When the sun hit them, they would have reflected the light, making the pyramids look like these dazzling white jewels in the desert.
Oh, I bet that was amazing to see.
It must have been. Over time, a lot of those casing stones were taken and used for other buildings in Cairo and other places.
Oh, that's a shame.
But you can still see some of them today.
Really?
Yeah, and it gives you a hint of how incredible they must have looked originally.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that the Great Pyramids are so much more than just old ruins.
Yeah, they're not just tourist attractions.
They're a testament to human ingenuity, organization, and ambition on a scale that's hard to fathom even today.
Absolutely.
They challenge our ideas about what ancient civilizations were capable of,
Uh-huh.
and they still have secrets we're trying to uncover.
Right.
To really understand them, we have to think about the engineering and logistics, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
but also the astronomy they knew, the math they used, and their whole culture and religious beliefs.
It's all connected.
It's a complex puzzle that keeps us fascinated. And for you, our listener, the story of the pyramids isn't just a history lesson.
No, not at all.
It reminds us that humans are capable of amazing things.
We are.
Innovation, collaboration, leaving behind something that inspires people for thousands of years.
That's powerful.
It makes you think about what we can achieve with knowledge, planning, and a shared vision,
Uh-huh.
even without all the fancy technology we have today.
Yeah.
So, as you go about your day, think about this. What other silent giants from history, maybe in your own field of interest, might have similar secrets hidden inside them? And think about how ancient civilizations, even without the technology we take for granted,
Right.
achieve things that still amaze us today. There's always more to explore, more to learn, and more to discover about the achievements of those who came before us.
Absolutely. Every part of these incredible structures, from quarrying and moving the stones to the astronomical alignments and the symbolism in their design,
Right.
it all tells a story. And
Yeah.
we're still trying to understand it all.
There's always more to learn.